Welcome to Inspiring Business with your host, Mark Bullock, who is the co-founder of videosocials.net and of videointerviewpodcast.com. In every episode, Mark interviews business and organizational thought leaders who share their stories of how they inspire others by making a difference. You can find this show on videosocials.net and YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and almost any podcast platform of your choosing.
Welcome, and today my guest is Hannah Chapman. Now, Hannah is an entrepreneurial wealth coach and certified financial planner, or CFP. She has over 16 years of experience in finance, and she's the founder of X Squared Wealth Planning and also Expansive CEO. Wonderful to have you today, Hannah. How are you?
I am wonderful, Mark. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it because this is the first time we've ever really met. We did have a short phone conversation a little bit of time ago, but who referred you to be on my show is Megan Pastrana, and I think we both hold her in incredibly high esteem. Absolutely terrific. Thank you, Megan, for introducing Hannah. And I've done a little bit of research on you, Hannah. You're pretty amazing. You're in the top fraction of 1% of those in your field as far as your social media presence, which I really wanted to acknowledge you for that. You've really got your act together there, and that's incredibly rare. So
thank you. I didn't know the percentage, but
well, there's I think it's 1/3 of 1/3 of 1/3 of 1% of the world's population is on YouTube. So you take any industry, and we can assume that it's literally a tiny fraction of 1% of people that's there, and you're there, and you're across all the other social media platforms, which we'll get into later. But I think really to start off, what are X Squared Wealth Planning and Expansive CEO, but more importantly, what's your story? How did you get started in all this, and what are you trying to accomplish?
Oh, I love all of those questions. So let's talk about all of them. So X Squared Wealth Planning is an independent registered investment advisory firm. So that's where my CFP, my certified financial planner status, investment planner, all of that gets to really shine. And I get to really support visionary entrepreneurs. And Expansive CEO is the side that gets to really dive into the business coaching, the mastermind, all of the networking that I do. I truly believe it's networking. It's not just social media, right? It's networking on socials. That has turned into this second entity that I needed, because in the financial industry, regulation is really important, right? And being a fiduciary and being, very careful with how I talk about things and what I recommend, and all of those pieces, that's highly regulated for the consumer safety. So I take that very seriously, and that's X Squared. Is everything is there. And Expansive CEO is where I get to be more expansive, right? And we get to be a little bit more open and more free, and really go through the humanity and the spirituality of business and how that ties back to our wealth building. So that's why there are two pieces. And the journey to getting there really goes back to, when I was a young child, because my parents and grandparents on both sides, and aunts and uncles and siblings all throughout my family, people are entrepreneurial. They own small businesses, different sorts, but for the most part, they are very hardworking, like mechanic shops. And my parents owned a repaint business where they painted people's homes inside and outside. My dad also owned a race car parts shop. These are not tech startups or anything like that, where people are raising hundreds of millions of dollars, or not that kind of business owner. We're talking like I'd say like blue collar, hardworking business owners. And when I was very, very young, those businesses were just starting out, right? The painting business was just starting out, and we had very, very little. And I like to start with this story because people, the fact that I'm a wealth advisor and the fact that, I own two businesses and all of these, people are like, oh, well, I come from entrepreneurial stock. Oh, it was just in your blood.
Right.
Yes and no. Because when it was very, very lean when I was little, that formative time from 0 to 7 where I was integrating what does money mean in the world? What
Mhm.
does safety feel like inside my body? We did not have very much, right? Things were very lean. There was a point where, we barely had enough for what we needed. So I internalized that I could not have what I wanted because we could barely get what we needed.
Right.
And when that's your formative experience, that really, becomes a piece of you that you then have to learn about and excavate later on.
Right.
So that experience in and of itself taught me, one, how to save money. When I was little, I was the child. I was the 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old that would, did you have one of those like big 5-gallon jars that was like, well, like a water jug full of coins? So when I was little, I would like dump that whole thing out. I would spend an entire day like rolling pennies into the, like I loved it. Sorting the money, counting the money, rolling it up. That was like one of my favorite things to do. I would get birthday money and I would get, we did get, eventually we started getting money for getting A's in school, that kind of thing. I think I had more savings than my parents by the time I was like 10 years old because I saved everything. It all went, and I didn't know what I needed it for, but I felt like I probably needed it sometime. So I had, maybe $400 or $500 in my savings account when I was little. And what's interesting is that piece of me, I feel like that's where the financial planner started. Like inside of me, like wanting to gather safety, wanting to know that I would be okay, wanting to know that I had my own back, right? That was where the financial planner really, like came into the forefront. And at the same time, the thought of being an entrepreneur was terrifying. I wanted to be a teacher or I wanted to be a bank teller. I wanted to work a job that was 9 to 5 where you get a paycheck and you go and you do your work and you get, it's just stable. Stability was everything to me. All the way up until about 2015, 2016 is when I started to, I had these entrepreneurial feelings and I did a lot of things that were side gigs for a long time, right? Like, so I had a stable job. I actually had 2 and 3 jobs at a time, a lot of times, even through college. And I always had something that was stable and something that was a side gig. And so that was part of, just part of who I am. I'm also a musician. My degree, my actual bachelor's degree is in flute performance. So there's a fun little nugget. And one of my first true entrepreneurial pursuits was building a flute studio, teaching private flute lessons. And so when I was in college, I worked 2 jobs and was building a flute studio and was playing gigs, playing with symphonies, playing for weddings, all that kind of stuff. But it was always the extra. It wasn't the base, right, of what I was earning. So when I got out of college, the first job, I had always been interested in working at a bank. And I knew that, I didn't want to rely on teaching flute lessons or gigging to pay the bills. It just wasn't going to be enough. And so I started working at a bank. And almost immediately, like this small bank that I worked at, a lot of the small business owners, like the local community, would bank here because it was a small locally owned bank. Fabulous people. So we would get the business owners to come in and do their drops every single day, and then sometimes I would go out to pick up their drops or their checks, or So I got to be the one that got to work with these business owners and get to know them. And oh my gosh, it was the best part of the job. It was so interesting, right? And I got to learn so much about them, and I just loved it. I loved it. My husband then got into grad school in a different state. And when he got into grad school, it was like, okay, well, we're going to move. We're leaving. And so I had to leave my job at the bank, and I was trying to get a job at another bank in a different state, which was not working. And instead I was like, oh, here's a job at a financial firm that's hiring for financial advisors. That's interesting. I built a flute studio. I could probably build a financial planning practice. It's like similar enough, right? So the answer is no, it's not. But what was really interesting was that, you know, when we moved and when I started working at that big firm, they sponsored all my licensing. You know, so I did all of that really fast, quick study. It's all, you know, I love finance. It's just, you know, really interesting to me. And in that first 12 weeks, this is the painful, this is the part that's the first failure, I would say. The first failure to get me into where I needed to go. In the first 12 weeks, you were supposed to get 5 clients. And I had never been comfortable with like selling. Like that was really scary to me, like terrifyingly scary.
Yep.
And we had to do cold calling, like really old leads. I had to go around to businesses and put fish bowls out so people would put their business cards in so they would win a lunch with me, you know, like I had to do all of that. And I did it, and I put myself out there over and over and over and over again. And I was having all of these wonderful conversations, and my managers were taking note, like, wow, you really like have really deep conversations with people. Like, how do you get so many people to talk to you? Like, I don't know. I just do it. But then the conversion part, like them actually like turning into clients, was not happening. So I have a question for you. Out of the 5 that I was supposed to get in 12 weeks, I got 1. Can you guess who my 1 client was?
I'm going to say probably a family member.
Yeah. My mom. She was my 1 client. And you know that I'll elaborate on that story, not here, but maybe like in a book. It's actually really interesting what that all led to. It was really beautiful. But my mom was my only client. And so I was so stressed. It was so hard. It was so difficult, but I was trying so hard, and I was putting all of my energy and effort. And because of that, even though I didn't actually succeed and get to stay in that role as a financial advisor in those first 12 weeks, I was picked up immediately by a big practice that was like, oh, okay, well, you didn't make it in that area, but you're fully licensed. I was a fabulous writer, you know, all of that. So they brought me in as a paraplanner. That was then my professional home for about 13 years. And I got to learn, I got to do all of the really impactful work of financial planning for tons of people that would have been so out of my league when I was a brand new advisor, right? I would not have been working with VPs at General Electric or, you know, directors at Johnson & Johnson. I would not have learned about all of that stuff in my first year if I had been on my own. And so truly was actually a blessing. It was this amazing, beautiful blessing. And I needed that time. I needed that time to learn. I needed that time to integrate all of this information and to really get to know different types of clients. So I spent 13 years in that practice. For the first about 8 or 9, I was doing financial planning for the entire firm. For all the partners, you know, I was the one, whenever something complicated came up, you know, I was the one doing all of those cases. And when the advisors would do the reviews, like I would do all of the work and I would give it to them and they would present it. And then if the client had questions, they would then kick them back over to me. Like, Hannah, can you explain this? Like, okay, yeah. So I was even doing a lot of client work before I was ever even an advisor. And this part, this is where the entrepreneurial spark kind of came back, because in about I want to say it was 2014, maybe. You know, I'd been there for a long time. I was a star employee. I was always like on top of it, like drop everything to like fix whatever's going on. Like Hannah will fix it. That was my role. And I will exceed all expectations all the time, right? It's very common, especially for women in male dominated fields. That is how we operate,
Yep.
right? Like I have to know everything before anyone else. I have to anticipate.
Yep.
I have to be excellent above and beyond all the time. And so I would get like pretty good raises, like 7 to 10% raises every year, and bonuses and all of that. And about 2014, when it came around to, annual review and salary increase time, I got like a 5% raise. And they said, okay, it's not because we didn't want, like you didn't deserve a bigger raise like you've usually gotten. It's because you're kind of capping out at what we want to pay for your position. And that was like,
Yes.
This is not where I stop. This is not where I stop. And so when they said that, and it wasn't a point of like, oh, I'm leaving then. It was, at that point I felt like, okay, well, this is, that's not good enough for me. And I actually am getting really bored. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be the one building the relationship. When I do the work, I want to then present it.
Right.
And I want to be the advisor. And so we shifted into that. They were like, you know what, that makes sense. Let's do that. I became a client-facing advisor with just this, like, again, decade of experience in what I was doing, right? And it was beautiful. It was really beautiful. I loved it. It was like, this is what my heart is meant to do immediately.
Right.
And then over the next couple of years, I realized that employee Hannah that exceeded all expectations all the time was not the same in their eyes, really, as, advisor Hannah who had ideas, who saw things differently than they saw things, and would try to communicate that, like how women were being treated in the financial planning process, how, clients would come back with questions and they didn't really understand. And I would say, I think we're not communicating effectively with them. Like, I think we need to do something different here. They didn't like that. Right? I was raising questions that were not well received. And that was kind of the start of like, maybe this is not where I stay, right? Maybe this was my path and it's not where I stay.
Right.
And without going into all of the pieces of why I left, there was some fairly significant, like, feeling professional trauma from my side that showed me that I had to be in a different spot. That really illuminated, the fact that I was not going to be able to grow the business that I dreamed of in that space. And that if I wanted to make what I felt that I'm worth, right? There was that piece. At this point, it's a little bit different. Like, I'm good, right? This is great. Everything that comes is just abundance and prosperity. But at that time, there was a significant feeling of, I am working so much and I am not being paid for the amount of work that I'm doing because it was someone else was paying me. Flip that. As soon as I launched X Squared, I was making a lot less from the, like, right away, but I was doing it. And so that felt like, oh, this is mine. I am building this. Every new client I get is, like, just more abundance, right? And I could feel that feels different in your body. And so it was such an interesting feeling to realize, become aware that, where I had grown, I needed to transplant myself. I needed to find a different soil, right, to grow. And so I launched X Squared January 29th of 2021. So I'm almost up on 2 years of being out on my own right now. And it has been the most transformational journey. And it has been like learning about myself. It's more about learning about me and how I show up for my clients. And then the better I show up for my clients, the more clear, the more present, the more I can listen. That is how clients then are able to actually financially transform. So it's been just an absolutely beautiful journey of finding the right collaboration partners, finding the right way to use my voice, finding the right way to communicate with my clients, and then really just like holding them, right? Being that piece of like, we can discover your financial picture together and then like make it reality. What you can dream of. The visionary entrepreneurs that I work with, they have so many dreams, so many visions. They want to create. And they're almost always told, no, you can't. You don't have enough money for this. You have to save this much or you're never going to get there. There's not a focus on the creation side, which is what entrepreneurs can do. That's what we do that's different from other people. And so for me, being that creative entrepreneur myself, I see them, I see you, I hear you, I'm listening, and I know that we can create this. It doesn't have to be there right now. We can create it. And that is really impactful. And then use the financial strategies, right? Use actual financial strategies to pair with both sides. It's the energy of money and it's the actual application of money together.
So it's absolutely fascinating because you're so well self-expressed and knowing who you are and what your path has been. And towards the end of your story, you really came full circle to where I wanted to get to before we finished up today, which is, why are you doing it for? So we had a few questions that we were going to talk about, but basically you answered all.
Oh, great! So efficient.
So I kind of wanted to take a little bit different direction and really kind of again complete the loop, because you did all of this because as part of your own self-development and part of your own growth, et cetera, but wouldn't you say that the underlying driver for all of this is the people that you serve?
Without question. It is the recognition that there wasn't a space. There was not a space for business owners to get full, like someone who can look at the business and look at the personal and like help them, because that feeling of, I don't know what to do, so I'm just not going to look at it. That's what we do with money so much, right? And then when you go to someone for help and then you feel shamed, you're not going to look again for a long time.
Right.
And I feel it on my heart so strongly that if we can lift up creative visionary entrepreneurs, right? If we help them create the vision that brings in more employees, that helps, when they're helping their clients to their fullest capacity, the world is getting better, right? We are creating more abundance in the world simply by the nature of creating new things and, creating new services and connecting new people. I read something recently that put this really succinctly, that literally inclusion in the economic process builds more wealth. And when we think about how many people are still excluded from the economic process, whether that's women, minorities, people in countries where they literally cannot work, right? Like not without education, all of those pieces, there are still billions of people on this planet who are not included in the economic process. And visionary entrepreneurs are usually the ones that can see that and can create more inclusion, and then in turn create more wealth, and in turn lift up those people. So it's all together.
Absolutely, it is, and one of the things that I'm proud of is how inclusive our company is, and we're heavily weighted towards women and towards minorities, frankly, even within our own organization. And I want to say that's intentional, but it's not really. It's just a matter of we work with those that are the best fit for us and our clients, right? So, and it just happens to be that those that typically have been attracted to work in our environment and with our client base, it's a very diverse world, and our client base is a very diverse client base. So if I may, I just wanted to take a moment because you're out there on social media. You're doing videos. You've got downloads on your website. You've got a great website. I've been to it, etc. But not everybody knows necessarily how to do that or is necessarily comfortable jumping on camera. As an example, there's a little bit of anxiety about being on YouTube, as an example, and so we created a number of years ago. We've been working with attorneys, financial advisors, CPAs, coaches, consultants, etc., for professional services for 15 years. One of our original services was helping people create blog content, right? So they're the author. We call them, we interview them, we record that, we transcribe it, we turn that into a blog post, and then we handle the technology of getting it out to social media platforms, doing the newsletters, etc. They're the authors. This isn't ghostwriting. This isn't, overseas, content creation, which is so prevalent, especially in financial advisors, as an example. So, but we help them get through the whole compliance, engines that they have to go through, help navigate that kind of stuff. So that was phoneblogger.net, and that's still our oldest service and one that's still going strong. And then about 3.5-4 years ago, we said, look, video is taking over social media, video is taking over websites, video is taking over everywhere. Yeah. If you want to reach people, it needs to be by video. At least it needs to be a big part of the mix. So, but how do we take these entrepreneurs, these visionaries, these practice owners, professional services that have no idea and may or may not have the budgets to spend thousands of dollars to do video production, to get a couple of minutes for a website spot, and that's not what's really going to make a difference anyway. What makes a difference is creating content that's of value, that is informative and educational for our prospective clients and frankly just for people that might refer us business, as an example. So we came up with the concept of video socials, and Megan, who is the one who referred you, is one of our very valued members of Video Socials, and she's done hundreds of videos and has a tremendous social media presence herself. But that is done in a social environment. It is a networking environment where we get together. Instead of the two of us on screen, now we would have 5 to 10 people on screen taking turns recording our 2 or 3 minute video blog posts, and getting that practice and getting that experience and learning from each other and getting each other's feedback on what's working, what we might want to tweak a little bit, etc. And it's just been, frankly, it's been my life's work, a culmination of things. The people that are involved are amazing, and what they're producing is nothing short of amazing. So then the next step is videointerviewpodcast.com, which is our newest service, and it's only about a year old. We have 35 or so clients that we're working with. We're producing hundreds of these video interview podcasts, which of course goes out on audio and et cetera, et cetera. But this is a longer form and a deeper and engaged conversation, and it allows you and I to expose each other and our services to each other's audiences, and allows us to grow again in an organic and authentic fashion that's of value to those who are taking the time to watch. So if those watching, if you have any interest of doing video, as an example, for your marketing, for your social media, etc., videosocials.net, and just click on the guest tab at the top of the screen. There's no cost or obligation. We'd be happy to meet with you. And if you are looking at the next step of doing this type of programming, where you're interviewing others that are synergistic and you can provide this longer form of information and content, it's videointerviewpodcast.com. Thank you for letting me take a moment to kind of cover through that. But what's coming up next in your world?
So It's so funny that you just shared all of that because, um, like you said, being visible on social media, being visible in the public sphere, um, that really has been, you know, that was my desire when I worked at a bigger firm. But
Mhm.
compliance is a very tight box when you're at a big firm, right? And there's a reason for that, right? When there are thousands and thousands of advisors, the answer has to start with no. Do you want to do something different? No.
Right.
Prove to me why it's okay, and then I'm gonna redline 40% of it, and you also have to pay for that, right? Every time you wanna say something that's anything different than the canned whatevers.
Mhm.
That was just, like, squishing my soul. I couldn't. I couldn't.
Yep.
I was like, "Oh, my creativity is dying." So being being visible, uh being out there with this message of, prosperity is for all of us
Mhm.
is where I'm going.
Right.
And it's, the even this format of conversation. I mean, that's what I do as well. And um it's on YouTube and I just put it onto a podcast so that it can be audio, right? Like that was okay, how can we
Mhm.
make it more accessible, more accessible, more accessible? All right, people want to be on YouTube. That's great. Also, sometimes I just want to listen, right?
Mhm.
I don't want YouTube open. I just want to listen. All right, it needs to go on the podcast platforms. Um, and what that's allowing me to do is talk more openly, talk synergistically about business, about, you know, exactly what you're saying. Like, how do we work together? Because
Mhm.
collaboration, cooperation, uh, like serving others before yourself, right? Serving others in addition to yourself, like that is where, multiplication, like not even multiplication, but exponential growth
Yes.
happens.
Yes.
And so what's coming up now, the new piece, newer piece is that, with Expansive CEO joining, so I created X Squared Wealth Planning in 2021. Expansive CEO became, born out into the world in 2022, really as a supplement or an add-on to X Squared. Um, and I have a mastermind community. So all of the
Mhm.
beautiful work that I do with my clients in X Squared, that's still open. And
Mhm.
that's for those business owners who, are in that mid to high six figures, pushing seven, growing, feeling like, oh, I gotta get my finances under control and I want to feel better while I'm doing it. I don't wanna be scared when I look
Mhm.
at my financials every month. I want to build wealth for my family that, you know, like,
Mhm.
actually looks like what I'm building in my business. I want things to feel more equal, right? I wanna feel the success that I'm seeing, that I'm creating for others.
Mhm.
All of those pieces, like, that's what I do in X Squared. And what I realized was those clients,
Mhm.
all of them, like, I can pair up any of them and they can work together, right? And I recommend them to each other all the time for different services. And, like, this is a perfect client. That's a perfect, like, I hear about how people work together,
Uh-huh.
and it just makes my heart so happy. And so I realized, I was like, I want them in the same room. I want my clients to have a space to grow together. And so that's where Expansive CEO Mastermind Community was born from.
Right.
And so that's what I'm talking about more now, and actually leaning into the collaboration in business
Mhm.
piece, right? So when we work together, when we support each other, that is where, like, literally not just partnerships or doing business together, that happens. That happens organically. But it's also that we're vulnerable together and we're sharing, oh, this is happening and I'm not quite sure how. Oh, I've been through this. Right, and I've
Right.
worked through this, and this is how it worked in my business, and you hear like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, there's, here's like 4 nuggets that I can now apply to my situation." Right, and working together in that way is really, really powerful. Um, so yeah, that's, the podcast is coming out. I will be talking about all of this so much more. And, those spaces are open. Expansive CEO Workshop and Expansive CEO Mastermind are open containers for people to come
Mhm.
and experience me, experience the community that I create, and, you know, have it be a place where they can learn how to be expansive, right? And expand over and over. And really discover. So the process that it's simple and it keeps going is like discovery. I call it discovery, alignment, and expansion. And so we discover what it is that we want, and we discover where we're at. And then we have a roadmap, right? We know where we are and where we want to go. And then we align to it. We align our time, money, and energy towards that thing. And when you do that, when you know where you want to go and you align your time, money, and energy towards that place, you will grow there. You will expand. And so the challenge then is, how do you hold that expansion? How do you incorporate that expansion into your being so that you can hold it? That's the roller coaster. That's the entrepreneurial roller coaster. I'm growing. Everything's breaking. Things are going wrong, right? And they're like, okay, start again, right? How do we come up here, integrate, and go up again and integrate again? That's the expansive CEO process. And if that is resonant for anyone, that is included. When you are a client of X Squared, that is included. And if you're just interested, like want to understand more, the Expansive CEO workshop is that process, and it teaches you that process. So those are really my main things in the world. And I'm just like so lit up about this, right? About bringing this information out.
You think?
Yeah.
Just a little bit. I just really want, because we could go on all day. But the reality is, if somebody hasn't figured out by now that you're passionate about this, that you're creating community, that you're working in the world of synergy, and now I know what X Squared is. Why, it's not 1 times 1 equals 1. No, it's 1 times 1 equals 3 or 5 or 10 or 20. Because that's how human nature works. Right. It's not just business. It is personal. Yes. So I just want to acknowledge that I get where you're coming from. As far as how people reach you, you have your website, of course, x2wealthplanning.com. You also have on LinkedIn, you're Hannah R. Chapman. On YouTube, you're at Expansive CEO. And you're also and there'll be links, folks, with for all of this, as well as ours, in however you're consuming this, whether it be in video, whether it be in audio, as far as a podcast or whatever. But so it'll be in the descriptions. But you're on Facebook, you're on Instagram, I believe.
Yeah, I'm on TikTok, I'm on YouTube.
Right. So, and as are we on pretty much all of them. But so we'll have all of those links contained. And then just before we finished up today, I just wanted to say thank you. I'm so glad that Megan introduced us. I'm thrilled to see somebody who has gotten the foundation of financial knowledge and experience, and then is transferring that to help those that are working a little bit smaller businesses, that aren't the directors of a Fortune 500 company, but are those entrepreneurs that are frankly the bread and butter of our nation.
Yes, I agree.
And the world. Thank you for what you do. And you had somebody that you also thought would be a great guest for the Inspiring Business show, and that is Katie Kearns. And what can you tell me about Katie?
Katie she's such a bright light, and her business is called One Spark Solutions. And that spark, it fits her so well. She is in this space of asking curious questions and really helping businesses find the spark of, she calls it unlearning, the magic of unlearning, right? So what are those best practices that you've been hammering at that really aren't, right? Like, we keep doing them and they're not good. Why aren't we asking questions about that?
Right.
What are the right questions to ask? And how do we get the entire team on board to really feel and embody that change and feel heard and seen in the process, so that when organizations, what's going wrong? right? Why are all your employees leaving? Well, because you're not listening to them, right? They're asking for things and you are not taking that in, right? And making, even it doesn't mean you have to change your whole process as a business owner, but it does mean, there's some questions that need to be asked and answered and openly listened to. And Katie really facilitates that with those, that curiosity, with facilitating workshops, with facilitating, trainings that are bespoke for teams,
Mhm.
for what they really need to do to embody that change, to bring that spark back into the business of why are we here together and what are we trying to create in the world. So she's phenomenal. And yeah, I can't wait to hear her on this too. She also has a podcast and called One Spark Stories. And yeah, she's hilarious. She's goofy. She has 2 kids who are hilarious. I mean, she's good people.
Oh, I'm very much looking forward to meeting with her, and hopefully she'll choose to be on the show. So, um, really delightful conversation that we've had today. I really do appreciate it so much, Anna. And again, all of the links will be tied in with this podcast and video podcast. And I certainly hope that people will take an opportunity to have a look. You've got some wonderful things on your website, some great information. You've got some free downloads, etc. I encourage people to absolutely check that out and to get a chance to experience you a little bit more. But because I think that what you do makes a difference, and that's the kind of people that we work with and that we want to have on our show. So thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you for having me. It was, just like you said, absolutely delightful. I appreciate it.
Terrific.
You've been listening to Inspiring Business with your host, Mark Bullock. Your positive comments, likes, and most importantly, your sharing of this show with others is greatly appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe to the Inspiring Business Podcast on whatever platform you prefer. You can catch prior episodes on videosocials.net and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and all the major podcast platforms.